Before we get into it, do me a favor. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment with your take. If you were running the Indiana Fever today, who would you protect as your core four heading into an expansion draft, and how would you handle this free agency chaos? This is one of the most pivotal off-seasons in recent WNBA memory, and Fever fans deserve clarity. Let's unpack what just happened, why it matters, and what Indiana has to do now to protect Caitlin Clark, Aliyah Boston, and the franchise's momentum. The headline feels like a gut punch. 4 familiar names, Sydney Coulson, Odyssey Sims, Brianne January, and Bree Hall, are now unrestricted free agents with expiring deals. And all 4 are heading to Athletes Unlimited Pro Basketball in Nashville during the WNBA offseason. AU is a competitive, short-format league where rosters rotate weekly and players collect points based on performance. It's good basketball, it's good money, and it keeps players sharp. But in this case, it also signals something else: opportunity elsewhere. Because when unrestricted free agents choose to stay on the court in other leagues, just as WNBA free agency is supposed to open, it means they're keeping options open, and Indiana's front office has to assume every one of them could be gone by training camp. That would already be unsettling in a normal offseason. This one isn't normal. CBA negotiations are still in motion, which means team business is effectively frozen. Until there's a new deal, the free agency clock isn't really ticking. No official signings, no extensions, no trades finalized. In practice, that leaves the Fever in limbo. They can't lock in returning veterans. They can't make the necessary depth moves. They can't guarantee what kind of roster will surround Caitlin Clark when she returns, or how they'll reinforce Aliyah Boston in the paint. For a team that finally found a little stability last year and rode it all the way into the postseason, that uncertainty is dangerous. Let's be clear about the value of the players involved. These weren't just end-to-bench placeholders. In a season that threw everything at the Fever, injuries, fatigue, a rotation shifting almost monthly, veterans like Sims and January gave Indiana real minutes, real production, and real leadership. They were grown-ups in the room during a stretch that could have unraveled. Instead, the Fever clawed into the WNBA semifinals and pushed the Las Vegas Aces to 5 games. Nobody outside the locker room expected that. They weren't supposed to hang at all once Clark went down. But they did, because enough veterans steadied the ship just long enough for the young stars to keep climbing. Now, those veterans are on the market, unrestricted, and set to play elsewhere until the WNBA turns the lights back on. If this is a temporary reset to clear space for targeted signings, fine. But if it's a reset without a plan, that's how you waste momentum. And Caitlin Clark's prime, that's the crux. Clark is the franchise. She's the engine behind sold-out arenas, record jersey sales, and the spike in national attention that Indiana has needed for years. But she can't be a one-woman solution. Basketball isn't tennis. You don't ride 2 players through a 40-game grind and into a title. Aliyah Boston is a future Hall of Fame anchor in the middle, no question. But it takes a core, a system, and depth to survive the league's best. It takes spacing, shooting, and experienced defenders to absorb the nightly blows that come with being a target. The Fever can't market their way to wins. They need to build a roster that makes Clark's life easier, not harder. Here's where it gets thorny. Even the so-called safe veterans aren't immune to rumors. Kelsey Mitchell was one of the most consistent scorers in the league last year, 20.2 points per game, 3.2 assists, and just shy of 40% from 3. When she and Clark share the floor, the Fever's backcourt stretches defenses thin. It's lethal, and the numbers back it up. But multiple teams, including the Dallas Wings, are reportedly circling. Do I think Indiana should move her? No. Do I think the Fever need to prepare for the possibility that a major offer turns her head? Absolutely. Because if Mitchell walks amid this many unknowns, Indiana's problems double. So what's the plan? The front office has repeated the right words: build around Clark and Boston. But slogans don't grab defensive rebounds in the fourth quarter. This team finally generated a working mix last season, veteran voice plus young energy, and now, after a string of expiring deals, they risk creating a leadership vacuum. Whether she admits it publicly or not, Clark took a beating last year. The Fever's #1 off-season priority has to be on-court protection. That means shooters to keep help defenders honest, rangy wings who slide across multiple assignments, and a backup ball handler who can absorb pressure runs without the offense falling apart. That's not future talk. That's now. The coaching question matters too. Stephanie White's system carried Indiana deeper than skeptics expected, but the book on her is out. It can grind through a regular season and survive a short series, but it needs multiple shot creators and trustworthy spacing to unlock its best self. If the front office rebuilds on bargain deals and last-minute signings, it puts White in a tactical bind. She can't coach pace and space when the roster's thin and rehabbing. She can't unlock Clark's passing without reliable shooting on both corners. She can't unleash Boston's post touches if nobody makes the backside pay. Meanwhile, look at the teams Indiana has to chase. The Aces aren't standing still. The Liberty aren't standing still. The Wings aren't standing still. They're stacking continuity, reinforcing their rotations, and slamming the free agency door before it opens. If the Fever spend January and February playing musical chairs with contracts, they'll enter camp behind the curve again. That's not about market size or money. Indiana has both cap space and sales momentum. It's about decisiveness and direction. Layer on the expansion draft dynamic and the urgency spikes. When new teams enter the WNBA, existing franchises can core or protect a limited number of players. You can't hide everyone. If Indiana wants to ensure no one can touch the heart of their team, the core four shouldn't be complicated. Clark and Boston are non-negotiable. Kelsey Mitchell belongs in that circle unless a blockbuster return changes the calculus. The fourth spot comes down to need and identity. Do you lock in a defensive heartbeat like Lexi Hall? Do you secure a floor spacer you trust in late-game sets? Do you double down on a locker room voice you know Clark respects? There isn't a wrong answer if the guiding principle is protection of your superstar and of the style you plan to play. Yes, the names in this conversation are messy. The off-season rumors are messy. And the league-wide freeze due to the CBA only sharpens every edge. But that's why the messaging from the front office matters so much. Right now, it's silent. No roadmap, no reassurance, no explanation for releasing 4 rotation pieces before the market even opens. Fans can smell panic masquerading as flexibility, and they've lived enough lost seasons to know the difference. Social media reaction tells the truth executives hate to read. Half the fan base calls this a reset. The other half calls it self-sabotage. Both can be right at the same time. You can clear space for upgrades and still invite risk you didn't need. You can believe in your young core and still undermine it by stripping the locker room of athletes who held it together when the calendar turned ugly. That's what makes this moment feel like déjà vu for Fever fans. Whenever they crest, something jars the steering wheel. This time, it's not bad luck. It's timing, planning, and communication. Let's talk numbers and reality. The Fever have cap space. They have sponsorship momentum. They have the hottest ticket in the league thanks to the Caitlin Clark effect. They are not broke. If they act like a small market team trying to save pennies in February, they will lose in June. If they treat free agency like a bargain bin, they will get exactly what bargain bins deliver: Band-Aids. Indiana doesn't have to win the headline contest. They have to win matchups. That means prioritizing players who can keep Clark upright. Keep Boston fed and punish teams that blitz the ball. And please, let's stop pretending Caitlin Clark can carry a broken rotation by herself indefinitely. She will compete. She will sell out every arena on the schedule. But stars burn out when the machine around them keeps stalling. We've seen it in every league. No organization should gamble on permanent patience from a generational talent. Loyalty is earned by direction. It's sustained by proof. If Indiana doesn't surround Clark with a roster worth leading, history says she will eventually look for a way forward, here or elsewhere. That's not drama. That's how sports work. The CBA freeze complicates everything. In a perfect world, the Fever would have retained the veterans they wanted, signaled who's really in the plan, and eyed 2 or 3 specific targets to shore up depth and shooting. Instead, everyone, including players, is waiting. Athletes Unlimited offers minutes and money now. That's not betrayal. That's smart business for athletes who need both. But it means Indiana's brand new stability, the surprise playoff push, the crowd energy, the sense that the climb finally started, is at risk of draining away in a news cycle. Momentum is a currency, and it burns fast. So where do the Fever go from here? First, they have to be honest with themselves about what they're building. If the goal is to contend now, you don't let 4 rotation pieces drift, and you don't wait to see what shakes out in March. You use your cap space and your selling power to be early and aggressive. If the goal is to stagger the build and wait for the next draft class, you tell your fans the truth and accept the heat. What you don't do is straddle both sides of the fence while the rest of the league sharpens its roster for a title chase. That's how you waste another season of Clark and Boston for nothing. Second, they must identify the core 4 and protect them, literally and philosophically. Clark and Boston are obvious. If Kelsey Mitchell stays, she's the third pillar. The fourth depends on the vision. A defensive stopper who can guard 1 through 3, a high IQ veteran organizer who calms late-game possessions, or a shooter who makes defenses live at the arc. Whoever it is, that player should fit the way Indiana intends to play, not just the way the board looks this week. Third, the front office needs to say something. Fans aren't asking for trade secrets. They're asking for a plan. They're asking to hear that protecting Caitlin Clark isn't a hashtag, but an actual strategy. Fewer body blows for her. More clean looks for Mitchell, more one-on-ones for Boston, and shooters who keep help defenders out of the paint. They're asking to hear that this isn't another reset for the sake of resetting. There's been a lot of talk about how Caitlin Clark changed the WNBA's economy. That's true. Her games spiked ratings overnight. Her jerseys flew. She got people who hadn't watched a WNBA game in years to buy tickets. But the Fever's future can't be measured only in gate receipts. It has to be measured in wins. The Caitlin effect will fill seats. It won't fix a roster that's light on two-way wings or short on shot creation. That's the work of scouting, cap management, and clarity. That's the work that starts as soon as the CBA allows it. Until then, everything stays theoretical. AU will tip off. Veterans will compete and keep their options open. Other front offices will prepare offers. And Fever fans will sit in the uneasy middle, waiting for Indiana's leadership to prove it learned from last year's near miss. No more hoping that grit alone can get them through another storm. Not with Clark's recovery, Boston's trajectory, and a Western Conference that punishes indecision. If you're a Fever fan, your checklist is simple. You want transparency. You want the core named and protected. You want at least 2 reliable shooters added. You want a defensive wing who takes the toughest matchups and lets Clark conserve energy for late-game shot-making. You want a backup guard who can run the second unit without hemorrhaging possessions. You want the team to stop acting like a passenger and start driving the bus. And if you're in that front office, you should want the same, because this isn't just about 2025. It's about building a culture that keeps great players, attracts the right free agents, and turns one magical season into a standard. Free agency is scheduled to open in early February, assuming the CBA doesn't push everything back again. That's not far away. Between now and then, Indiana has a choice. They can either steer this back toward a real plan, or let the league write their story for them. One path keeps Caitlin Clark's rise tied to playoff wins and a contender's arc. The other path uses her brilliance as cover for organizational drift. The window is open, but windows close. What do you think? Did the Fever make a smart play to free up space and reset? Or did they light the fuse on another off-season disaster? Who are your core 4 protections if an expansion draft lands tomorrow? Clark and Boston are locks, but who are your other 2? Drop your picks in the comments. Hit like if you want more straight talk on the WNBA and Indiana Fever news, and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive when free agency officially opens. This fan base waited a long time for meaningful basketball. It's time for the organization to match that urgency.